Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the weekly live stream where we talk about job search, everything related to getting hired. So how to answer job interview questions, how to discover jobs, how to apply for them, how to get interviews, how to pass interviews, how to negotiate offers, etc., etc. We're talking about posted jobs. We're talking about networking, everything that's related to job search and careers. That's what we talk about right here. Welcome to episode 129 of How to Get Hired. This episode is called How to Prepare for Job Interviews, live Q&A. So we're going to be talking about that. And I know that you guys keep coming back, not just for the best hair on YouTube, but also for the advice. If you are seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. Get in the chat and let me know what you are wondering about, what you're struggling with. If you have been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in the chat and participate. That is the whole point of this. I'm here to help you out. A special shout out as always goes out to my YouTube channel members. Membership has its privileges. And my Patreons, my super thanks donors, if you see what I'm saying, my super thanks donors, and to you, my participants. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Yes, we are going to get into it. So, you know what? While we're waiting for people to show up and for the questions to roll on in, let's talk about the title of this stream, which is How to Prepare for Job Interviews. Now, obviously, there's a couple of things you could be doing here. There's a couple of situations. One is if you're trying to do a last-minute cram right before the interview, okay? That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about like how to prepare in general for job interviews when it isn't in like an hour that you're doing the interview, right? You have a little bit more time, and you're trying to plan out what you're going to do in maybe a few days before your job interview. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's just get into it. Okay, so there are different types of job interviews. You got to understand the format, right? There's screening interviews. There are virtual interviews. You're going to be doing it over teleconferencing, like over a Zoom call, something like that. And then there's in-person interviews, which everybody loves so much, right? So you need to understand the format. Now, listen, I want to say this once. If you are doing a virtual interview, you're going to be at home and you're going to be doing the interview over like a Zoom call or a teleconferencing software, something like that, like Microsoft Teams or, whatever choose your poison, right? Make sure that your technology works and that you are familiar with it. I know that sounds self-evident, but you would not believe how many people do not get this right, and they look so unprofessional when they do it, fumbling around with microphones and, cameras, and the camera, like what you're seeing on the screen looks terrible. Okay. Take the trouble to test your rig, your equipment, whatever you use, even if it's just a smartphone or something. Take the trouble to test it first. You can do interviews on smartphones. I would not recommend it if you have any other choice there. John is here. Welcome, John. John says, Happy Wednesday. How are you doing? I'm doing great. I hope you're doing good, John. It's a beautiful sunny day where I am. And Wisdom Women Warrior says, though technically strong, but after the gap in career, how can one resume back as many companies refuse to consider the profile? What? Okay, that's a very long sentence, and you got something going on with the words that you used. Let's see here. Though technically strong, but after the gap in career, how can one resume back as many companies refuse to consider the profile? Okay, so you were talking about a work gap, okay? I've done many videos on work gaps. It's a complicated question. Short answer is there's one thing you can say that sometimes helps. If you get that far, okay? If they don't even, they won't respond to you, there's not much you can do. But if you do get to the point where they'll talk to you, okay? Like there's an interview or something, you can say that it wasn't a gap in the sense that you were unemployed. It was a conscious decision to go back to school. Okay. So then run out and register for like a few free internet classes or something. just so you can say truthfully that, yes, I've gone back to school. It's not any kind of lie. You don't want to lie outright in a job interview. You can exaggerate, you can obfuscate, you can choose not to reveal things. That's your right. But lying outright is kind of not great, so that's the deal. Now, if you are trying to get the interviews, okay, learn what the hidden job market is and learn how you get those with networking, okay? If you don't have a clue and you're just starting out, okay, I have a course that talks about that. There's also some free resources linked in the description box under this live stream, okay? One is called Hidden Job Market. One is called How Successful People Get Jobs. Check those out. That will help you, okay? Anyway, let's get back into it. So obviously there's different types of interviews, okay? If you're preparing for the interview, get your technology working, okay? If you're doing remote interviews, make sure your sound is good, make sure your video is good. The professional thing to do is to turn on your video feed, even if the people on the other end don't have their video feeds turned on, okay? I will say that right now. That's just how it goes. They have the capability of doing that, right? You do too. You could turn off your video feed, but you will make a much better impression if you turn it on, regardless of what's going on the other end. Okay? From this point on, I'm going to be talking pretty much about in-person interviews because everything applies also basically to lesser forms of interview, like remote interviews and screening interviews and phone interviews. Okay? Beforehand, research the company and the role, okay? That's very important. Take literally 2 minutes to look up the company, okay? Find out what they do and find out key things that I don't see a lot of people talking about, like the place where you're going and the place where you applied for, like where the job is. Is that a branch office or is that their head office? Are they distributed all over the world? Or are they just in your hometown? Things like this are pretty damn important to know when you go to a job interview. Okay, you have a basic awareness. That this company is huge, it's all over the world, but they're hiring for a position at the local branch office. Okay, it's not where the CEO is, it's just some branch office. There's only 20 people that work there, something like that. That's the kind of stuff that does matter, okay? Obviously, you're going to prepare your talking points. Now, one of the things that I would do when I'm preparing for a job interview or when one is preparing for a job interview is there's kind of two types of questions to prepare for. One are what I would call standard job interview questions. There's about 10 of those. Those are things like, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your salary expectations? What's your current salary? How do you handle stress? Those kind of things, right? Do you have any questions for us? These are standard interview questions that you're pretty much guaranteed to be asked in some form at every interview, okay? They have standard answers, okay? So you go out, you learn the answers for those. You can check out my playlist on how to answer those questions, but there's many resources out there. And, that's the sort of first tier of questions that you would want to prepare for. The second tier of questions you'd want to prepare for are things called behavioral interview questions. If you've never heard of those, that's where they say, tell me about a time you did this, right? So the answer is going to vary among individuals. Everybody's going to have their own answer to that because we all have our own different, unique experiences in our past, and they're asking us about our past, okay? Now, those questions are a little bit different because you can't prepare for those really because there's so many questions they could possibly ask you. They could say, tell me about a time that you succeeded despite having a conflict with a coworker in an environment where you had to show creativity and you were new. Tell me about a time that happened to you. You see, you can just make up these questions, right? What are the odds of somebody prepared to answer that question, right? So you can't go about preparing for behavioral questions the same way you would prepare for standard job interview questions, right? The way you prepare for behavioral questions is you kind of do it in reverse. You memorize 10 answers. 10 stories from your past. Okay, so probably 5 of your most shining moments where you succeeded on the job. You know, if you're just getting into the workforce, you've only ever been in school, there are 5 stories where you succeeded, like in school, right? You know, you did group work and other people weren't pulling their weight, but you pulled it all together and you got a great mark, you know, something like that. Okay. So 5 are your most shining moments. 5 are like other things, like, you know, when you had a conflict with a coworker, when you had a conflict with your boss, when you showed creativity, things like this, right? So you're going to memorize those. You're going to say them in a standard format. One of the most popular is the STAR format, right? And you're going to vet these stories. You're going to make sure that it's okay for you to say them in a job interview. It doesn't signal any red flags or anything like that. You know, then you're going to memorize the story and you're going to practice saying it in this compact format. The reason why we do that is so you can say the whole story in like a minute. You know, if you're there trying to tell something that goes on for 10 minutes, it's not going to work. They're going to cut you off. You've taken up the whole interview, right? You know, with this one question, you know, it's just bad on multiple levels. Okay, so those are the 2 types of questions you have to prepare for: standard interview questions and behavioral questions. Okay, so that's the homework that you do in preparing for job interviews. Okay, now let's see here. I'm just looking at some generic notes that people say because I'm giving my take on them. Yeah, it says like know your resume. Yeah, obviously that's self-evident. If you applied for the job with your resume, know what's on your resume, right? Maybe you're customizing each resume you send out, right? So obviously retrieve the version of your resume that you sent them, right? Have it maybe with you at the interview. So if you're at a physical job interview, have your resume printed out with you. You could put it on the table or something in front of you, just as a reference, right? Also have the job posting available. So if you're physically at an interview, print it on a piece of paper, have it in front of you. And what helps is if you highlight the requirements on it, so you can glance down and see, yeah, they said they were looking for this and this and this and this. Those are things for you to speak to in the interview, okay? You're going to bring, like, if you're physically going to like an in-person interview, you're going to bring several documents printed out, okay? I mean, yes, you could bring them on like a tablet or a smartphone or anything like that. I highly recommend that you, if you can, you print them out on paper, because there's red flags and issues with having smartphones on the table and in your hand during job interviews, okay? Now, if you're doing a virtual interview or you're on the phone, none of this matters because they can't see you. They can't see what you have around your computer or whatever, you know, that's fine. Okay, but just have it there so you can glance at it, almost like cheat notes, right? Okay. Part of preparing for the standard interview questions is knowing what to ask them if they prompt you. Usually it's the last thing in a job interview. They say, do you have any questions for us? You don't go, no, right? You have prepared some questions before, okay? And you ask intelligent questions that signal great things about you, like you're interested, like you can do the job, and things like this, right? You know, you're not going to be an issue. You want to get along with people there, and you know you're excited to do it. Okay, let me just get through this, and I'll get to questions. Auntie K has been writing like a novel in the chat. I will get to that in a second. Okay, mindset and body language. Okay, well here's the deal. What are job interviews about? Are they about how you answer the questions that they ask you? No, they're not actually, right? You see, your application, your job application, that was about your technical skills. Okay, so what they were looking for when you sent in your job application was, what are your technical skills like? Do you meet the requirements or do you not meet the requirements? If you meet the requirements, how well do you meet the requirements? Are you an exact fit or is it kind of loose, right? Okay. That gets you the interview. Okay. So if you've been given an interview, that signals that they think that, at least on paper, you meet the requirements for the job in a technical sense. You can do the job, okay? There would not be any point to interviewing people that on paper are just not qualified. Because even if you meet them and they turn out to be wonderful, you still can't hire them because they're just not qualified. You know what I mean? So everybody who gets an interview, technically, like from the technical point of view, they are qualified to do the job in the eyes of the employer, okay? So that means that when you get to a job interview, you're not competing with other candidates really on how technically qualified you are to do the role. You're competing with the other candidates on what you're like as a person. That's the whole point of a job interview. You know, what is this person like? Do we want to work with them? Because on paper, somebody could be really qualified, but they could be insufferable, you know, as a person, right? You do not want to work with them. Or they could have issues with them on a personal level. Like maybe, you know, they have personal issues, like they have a terrible temper or something like that. Or they take offense like very easily, you know what I mean? These would be issues. It has nothing to do with how qualified you are. It's that they don't want to hire that person because they have to work with that person every day. And they do not want to work with that person, right? That person's going to make their life a living hell. Okay, so job interviews are really what you're like as a person. So that's where it comes down to things like making a good first impression, right? Being the person that they would want to work with. You're friendly, you're enthusiastic, you know, this kind of thing. You click on a personal level. When you say something, they understand perfectly. When they say something, you understand perfectly. You know, you have the same communication style, same work style, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so to that end, you're going to go down there and you're going to be professional. You're going to look the part, right? So when you do your research on the company, okay, and you learn technical things like, is this a branch office or is this their one location? What does the company do? How big are they? Things like this. When you look up that stuff, you're also going to look at how these people dress. What do they look like? For larger employees, larger employers, or if you're a larger employee like me, I'm not an employee, but if I was, I would be larger. Just big bone, water retention. But if you are, if the employer is like a larger organization, okay, if you go online and you do something like a Google image search, a lot of times you can look at images of the company and you might be able to see the employees and you can see how they dress, right? So if they're all in jeans and a t-shirt, that tells you something. If they're all in three-piece suits, that tells you something else. And if they're all in overalls, that tells you something else, right? So you can get an idea of what they look like. What's usually good for a job interview is if you show up looking like them. You look like you belong there. You don't look completely at odds from the people that work there. They're all in overalls and you're in a tuxedo. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you want to avoid because you don't look like you're the one. In which case you have to change people's minds. Pretty hard to do. If you show up and you look like the one that they want to hire that fits, you know, then all you have to do is not talk yourself out of a job, right? So that's part of your preparation, excuse me, is to look at how these people dress, right? And you try and mimic it if you can. If you don't know, and you are dealing with the recruiter to get the interview, you can always contact the recruiter and say, listen, you know, what's the dress code for the interview? Is it business casual or any other guidelines you can give me? So it's also a reason to talk to the recruiter. Okay, so you go down and you do your interview. Hopefully all this makes sense, right? Now, here's what I'd recommend, okay? I've given you some stuff to sort of bone up on, right? The different types of job interview questions. You're going to learn how to answer them, and you're going to practice one-on-one. You're going to practice sort of by yourself, maybe in a mirror, answering these questions, memorizing the answer, right? Learning what the right answer is, and then memorizing it, okay? Now, that's where a lot of people kind of stop. They do that much, and they go, okay, that's good. I'm prepared, right? What I would recommend is that you go one step further. Okay, and that is doing mock interviews. A mock interview is when you do a pretend job interview with somebody, okay? And they pretend to be the interviewer, and you pretend to be the candidate, and you pretend that it's a real job interview, and they ask you questions and you answer, and it simulates a real job interview, okay? Now, people who have money, people that are going for like higher level jobs, they can pay professionals like HR firms and things to assist them with this. This is actually a very popular thing for a lot of HR companies. They make a lot of money, especially with executives, where basically they offer this service. They say, listen, for a fee, we will help you prepare. You come down, you do pretend job interviews with us, so you get practice. You think you know what to say? Okay, come down and let's see, right? And then as a fringe benefit, we will give you feedback. We are recruiters, we are, previous hiring managers. We will give you our objective opinion of you. So we'll tell you if you're doing something wrong, your body language is off, or, you're doing something that's like a red flag, but you don't realize it. We will help you identify that, explain it to you, and help you improve, right? Okay, so on the high end, you could pay for that stuff. On the low end, you don't need to pay for like a recruiting company to do this. You can do this with a friend or family member. So if you got some other person around in your home or near your home, somebody loitering around like a cousin or a parent or, whatever, some worthless dirtbag, that you just long to put them out of their misery, they can actually help you with this, right? You say, listen, come over here. We're going to do a mock interview. You pretend to be the interviewer. You're going to interview me, and this is going to be like a real job interview, okay? The whole point is so that I rehearse, right? So you either can make up the questions or I will give you a list of questions, whatever. Okay, but we're going to do this and we're going to act like this is the real deal. Okay, now, if you're just doing that with somebody around the house or around your home or whatever, friend or a family member, you could do, what I would recommend is doing 3 to 4 of these a day for 2 weeks. Okay, like Monday to Friday, so 5 days a week, 3 to 4 of them a day. That's like, what? 15 to 20, right? Something like that, if I got that right, for 2 weeks, right? So, no, that's like 30 to 40, right? Sorry. So 30 to 40, you do 30 to 40 mock interviews, a couple of things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to know your stuff backwards and forwards. When you go to an interview, they ask you a question, you're not going to stress out because 90% of the questions you've already rehearsed backwards and forwards. You know the answers, you're pretty confident. Number 2, you're going to feel much more at ease, right? You made all your rookie mistakes doing the pretend interviews at home. You're not making your rookie mistakes at the real deal when you lose the job, right? So that's the advantage there too. And you're going to feel so much more confident. Okay. The other thing is that if you were really doing something wrong, like you were just saying the exact wrong thing or something, there's a good chance that the person that's been helping you with the mock interviews can tell you, say like, listen, you keep like no offense, but you keep saying this. Maybe you shouldn't say that because that's coming across like really bad. Like that comes across arrogant or passive aggressive or whatever. Maybe don't say that. So if you have someone that you trust, like a friend or someone, maybe not a family member, but a friend, they can give you these tips. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to get into the chat and answer Auntie K if Auntie K is still here. Okay, no, sorry, John was here first. So John says, I've been furloughed from my job for about 7 weeks now. Haven't been in contact with my manager since then. Would you say it's all right to ask for a reference from them? Surprised they didn't offer. Yeah, of course. Like you can ask for it. Now, I don't know if they'll give it to you. I don't know what's going on, just because you haven't contacted them. But you know what I mean? The best way to communicate with people, hands down, is in person, face to face. Failing that, if you can do some kind of video call, whatever, that's the second best choice. Failing that, like a phone call where it's like voice only, right? Okay. And then failing that, emails and DMs and texts and stuff like that, right? So like that's kind of the hierarchy. So if you can do it in person, do it in person. Okay. If you can't, then get on the phone. Don't just send like an email or something. Like get on the phone with them. Okay. Or on the video call, whatever, if that's an option for you. Okay. Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know the exact details, so I'm assuming that they remember you. You know, you weren't like employed for one day and then you're gone for 7 weeks. You might have been there for months and then you're gone for 7 weeks, in which case they probably know you, right? You know, that's what I'm assuming. But yeah, there's no harm in asking. It's, listen, like, anyone wondering, is it okay if I ask? The answer is always yes, you know? You know what I mean? Like, yes, you can ask. If it's something reasonable, you can ask. Okay, and this is clearly reasonable. So go ahead, John. You're fine. Auntie K says, "Hi, Bill. I'm in the middle of a recruitment process. In the application form, I left my salary request blank. When the manager asked for my salary expectation during the first interview, I dodged the question by saying essentially, 'It is too early to say.' At the end of the second interview, the manager told me to think about my salary request. Now he sent me an email saying before they make final choice, they need to hear my salary request. How should I phrase my response to the email in a way so that I don't give a number range, but don't seem like I'm just being evasive?" Well, listen, okay, so I've done a video that's gotten millions of views on this channel called, you know, how to answer the question, like, what are my salary expectations? It's a 3-step process, right? You did the first step where you say, they ask you, what are your salary expectations? And you say, well, listen, it's too soon to say. I don't know anything in this job. I don't even know the benefits, if there are any. I don't know the vacation. I don't know if there's sick days. Like, you know, I don't know the schedule. Are there shift premiums? Is a mandatory overtime? Like, I don't know anything about this. It's too soon. I can't really give you a number that would be accurate at this point, right? So that's the first thing you try. Sometimes that works. A lot of times it doesn't. They keep pushing. They say, yeah, we know all that, but we still need your salary expectations, right? So you move on to step 2, right? Step 2 is to throw the question back at them, right? And that's to say, like, listen, okay, this job was posted officially by the company. That means it must have been approved officially by the company before it was posted. And if it was approved, then the salary range for the position must have also been approved. So, can I ask, what is it? You know? And then if they tell you anything, they say, well, it's this or this is the range. Whatever they say, you say, that works for me, right? Okay, so that's the second thing you try. Okay? Now, I don't know if you've done that or you got to that stage, okay? Sometimes that works and you can get them to disclose, well, you know, here's the official range, right? The point is you say that works. You don't like give a number. You're trying not to give a number, okay? If that fails, they say, well, we don't know the range of the job that we're hiring for, right? You know, some crap like this, right? In that case, you move on to step 3, which is to give a wide range, right? So you get like a range is like 2 numbers, you know, anywhere from here to here would be good, right? And you got 2 numbers there. Now those numbers are a stretch, but they're not ridiculous. They're still just within reason for this job, okay? So you're not giving a ridiculous number that just is stupid, right? You're giving something that, you know, is not unreasonable, but it's a stretch. So you're essentially giving a wide range. And you say, look, at this point, you know, you're really grilling me on this. Based on what I know of this position, look, somewhere between here and here would be good for me. And this is a wide range, okay? You know, I can't narrow it down anymore. It's just not possible. I'd be pulling a number out of the air, and I don't think you want that. You want something realistic that I can stick to. And at this point, that's all I can say, right? Somewhere between here and here would probably be good, depending on details, right? So if they push you further, which is kind of a red flag at this point, okay? If they push you further, Franco Pasquale is writing a lot. What did you post, like 15 posts in a row? okay, if they push you any further, that's a red flag. And you've given them something that's reasonable. You've given a range, okay? And the reason you do this is because when they ask this question, the whole purpose is to eliminate you. It's not to have a serious discussion about like accommodating your compensation needs. It's to eliminate you. Do you want too much? You do? Okay, you're out of the running, right? That's what this question is for, right? So if you give a single number, you fail, because either they eliminate you because it's too high, or if it's really low, they're going to tie your offer to that low number, in which case you lose, right? You get the job, but they pay you minimum wage when you're a professional or something. I don't know. Anyway, so when you give a range, it's the best of both worlds. They can't eliminate you because you asked for too much, because the range is very wide and it starts from quite low. But yet, it leaves room for you later on to ask for a higher number, right? Because you never committed to a low number. You said it's like somewhere in this range, and the range goes pretty high, right? So that's the reason why you would want to answer that way. Now, you claim that they're asking you this in an email. So I'm not sure if you did step 2, but you would certainly do step 3 in the email, is what I'm thinking. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. So that was Auntie K. That's what I have to say to that. Moshi says, this is genius. Well, thank you, Mushy Talmud. I'm sure that's exactly how you pronounce your name, and I stake my life on it. V's World says, had an interviewer ask, what are some characteristics you're looking for in us as a company? Any tips on good answers to give? Listen, okay, have you done your research on the company is the question, because that's what people should always do before a job interview. You could take 2 minutes to get on Google the company, see what you find out about them. Now, listen to me very clearly here, okay? If you're the type of person that takes things very, very literally, you're going to have a hard time in job interviews, because this sounds like a legitimate question, doesn't it? Right? So you naturally would want to give a legitimate answer to it. What are you wondering about this company? Let's ask them, right? I got news for you. That's not what's going on here, okay? Everything you do in a job interview, you're being judged for, okay? They are forming their opinion of you based on what you say. Now, you could be brutally honest in a job interview. You could say, listen, your company's been in the news recently. There's been some scandals for mistreating employees. Quite frankly, I would like to know how you plan to mistreat your employees in the next year. Right? Maybe that's what you're honestly wondering. Do you say this in a job interview? No, you don't, because it's a performance. They're judging you based on what you say in the job interview, including when they prompt you for questions, right? What are you wondering? What do you want to know? Now, if you want to know something real like that, right? What kind of impression are you giving when you grill them and you say, like, listen, what would I like to know? Let's see. Well, if you were the CEO of this company, what major problems would you identify with it, and what would you change? Right? Like you might want to genuinely know the answer to that question. I think anybody will want to know the answer to that question. But do you ask that in a job interview? No, because you're putting the interviewer, the recruiter or hiring manager, you're putting them on the spot. You're creating awkwardness. They're not getting a good vibe from you. They just met you. They don't know who you are. They don't know how wonderful you are. They met this person grilled them and put them on the spot where, they were asked a very awkward question. They couldn't answer honestly because they're representing that company. They're not going to give you all the dirt on them, right? Okay. So here's where they're kind of baiting you, okay? V's World. This is where they're baiting you, okay? What are you looking for in a company? Now, if you say, I'm looking for, in a company, I'm looking for this, and they're all things that this company doesn't have and can't provide, right? Are you going to pass that interview? Probably not, right? They're going to conclude, well, we're a local company. You just said you're looking for a global multinational where there's a lot of opportunities for travel and promotion and all this, learning all kinds of different things. That's not us. So I'm sorry, you're not a good fit for this company if that's what you're looking for, right? So if you want this job, okay, and I'm going on the opinion that it's always better that, like, if you're in the interview, try to pass the interview. You know what I mean? Like, okay, maybe it turns out that this opportunity is not looking as attractive as it once did, right? When you agreed to do this. But since you're here, see if you can get them to offer it to you. And then at least then you have options. You can decide to take it or maybe you don't want to reject it outright. You could say, well, listen, if you pay me $1 million, I'll take it. You have options, right? Rather than saying, you know what, screw you, I don't want this job, goodbye. What's the point of that? You've come this far, see if you can get them to offer it to you. And then at least you have some options, right? So when they ask you questions like this, it's a performance, okay? They're prompting you to ask them something real. You want to know things that are real. The problem is that if you ask the tough questions, it doesn't make for a good first impression, right? And that will a lot of times eliminate you if you grill them or create awkwardness. So if they're asking you, what are you looking for? You say something that describes them exactly. So when you did your research on the company, you found out these things about them. Those are the things you're starting to describe. That's what I would do, right? Okay, let's say hypothetically you get this job. There'll be plenty of time to learn about that stuff after you've gotten the offer, okay? Right? You can answer your questions, but later. Now is not the time to try and grill them or get the dirt on them, right? This is part of your making of a first impression. So that's what I would say. So hopefully that makes sense. V's World. Franco Pascual says, hey, Bill, and this is the beginning of a big, long, holy crap. This is the beginning of a big, long story. First of all, thanks for all the videos you made. They have helped me immensely. I want to thank your opinion of the situation. You're welcome. I work in the IT industry. How would I have guessed that? The IT person is the one that wrote the big, long spiel. That's never happened before. I'm currently employed, better money. A couple of weeks ago, I started the recruitment process for a company, developer, startup. Initial interview, technical interview. This Friday, I'm going to have the final interview with the big boss. What I wonder is, nowhere in the interview process have they mentioned anything about the salary or the salary range. Yeah, that's typical. That's typical, right? Franco says, in the initial interview, which was not with a recruiter, but with people from the lower positions. Lower than a recruiter? Wow, that's pretty low. It's like the guy who sweeps the floor kind of thing. They did not mention anything about the salary range. They also did not ask the typical question, what are your salary expectations or whatever. How do you recommend I approach this situation? Because I guess okay, well, I sort of answered that, okay? Like the 3-step process, right? That's kind of just basically how you address that. Now, some companies will try and get around that by asking you similar questions. They'll say, what's your current salary, right? Like it's not the same question. They're not asking you about your expectations. They're asking you, how much money do you make? And now, technically, in some parts of the world, that question is illegal. In most parts of the world, it's not, so they can ask you that. Other times, even if the question is illegal in your region, they ask you it anyway, right? Which is beautiful. So you still have to prepare for that question, at least in theory, okay? So it's that 3-step process. What are your expectations? 1, it's too soon to say. I don't know anything. I don't even know the benefits. Your salary expectations are going to change based on what benefits they're giving you, right? Okay, you don't even know that, right? So it's a silly question. That's because this is only used to eliminate you, like I mentioned like about 10 minutes ago. Okay, second stage is, like I said, is to throw the question back at them. Well, can I ask, what's the range for this position, right? You guys approved the position, you posted officially, so you must have approved the salary range for this position. Can I ask what it is, right? Okay. And then the third thing, if they say, oh, we don't know, or we don't disclose that, but yet we need you to disclose what your expectations are. You got to love that. Then you move on to stage 3 where you give a wide range. You say, listen, somewhere between here and here, somewhere in there, that'll be fine with me. And then if they grill you any further, you say like, well, listen, I'm sorry. I don't know key things about this position. I don't know anything about the compensation. I don't know anything about the working conditions or the schedule or anything, Are there opportunities for improvement? Is my boss going to be a colossal sociopathic prick, Because if he or she is, then I'll take it, but I'll need, an extra 5%. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know anything about it. If they're trying to grill you, it can get kind of weird, in which case, like they're revealing themselves to you. They're not going to treat you very well if that's what they're going to do. But listen, like all you say is look, all I can do at this point, I can give you this range, somewhere between here. That's all I can say. And I can't refine it. I'd be pulling a number out of the air. So there's your answer, Franco says, will I be in a position to negotiate? I guess not, because I have no other offers. Also, there's basically no public commitment. Okay, so you can't negotiate until you get a job offer. If you try and negotiate before they even offer you the job, they'll just eliminate you and go with another candidate. Just, no, this person's playing hardball. Okay, well, we'll just eliminate them and go with one of the other 5 people we're talking to, or 8 people we're talking to. You have absolutely no power to negotiate in the selection process until they offer you the job. That's like the earliest possible time you have like any kind of power, right? Now, as you say correctly here, if you don't have any alternatives, so if they offer you the job, you get to that point, and at that point, your options are unemployment or taking this job offer, right? You've got 2 options. Okay, you really don't have any negotiating power, right? You can bluff them. You can say, well, I'm going to need this much. But any bluff you make, you can prepare, you need to allow for your bluff to be called, okay? So that's the problem, right? So the way it works is that if you have other options, like for example, maybe you don't have any other job offers, but you've got 5 interviews lined up in the next 2 weeks with other leading employers, right? Okay, like that's something. You could say like, look, okay, I don't have any offers, but I got several leads that, the odds are is that hopefully one of them will work out. That's a higher likelihood of that. So I can afford to play a little bit of hardball to ask for a couple of things, right? And if they rescind the offer, they say, no, screw you, no dice. I got lots of things lined up, so it's looking pretty good that I'm going to find something that's equivalent. Okay. Franco says, thanks in advance and sorry for so many messages, and also my additional advice for tackling this interview will be appreciated. Listen, just recognize, Franco, that job interviews are about who you are as a person. They're not about your technical skills. No matter what people claim, no matter what people say, it is not about your technical skills. That gives you something to talk about in the interview, right? Your history and the things you've done, what makes you qualified, those are things it's like content you can talk about in an interview, right? But really, they're not assessing you on that content. That's what they did when you sent in your application, right? Okay? Now they've moved on to what do you like as a person, right? So that's what the interview is really about. Now, there's always exceptions, like in IT and in some other areas, they give you like little tests and exams like you're back at school. That's usually because either they don't trust the credentials or they want to verify that the credentials mean that you are indeed qualified, like it appears, in terms of technical skills. Maybe the very latest stuff, there are no credentials on it, because it's rapidly evolving. Okay, so sometimes you get that, but the primary purpose of job interviews are to assess you as a person. Okay. V's World, you're welcome. Ryudas Gray Rat says, LOL, I'm not even in college and suddenly I'm here. Okay. It's like, hey everyone, I'm here. Isn't that hilarious? Yeah, it is. But hopefully you're learning something. Hey, the sky's the limit. It's good to be forward thinking. It's good to sort of see what you got to look forward to. And if you can get a head start on this, you're going to be kicking ass, and you're going to be selected over your peers for things. So it's not ridiculous or stupid or weird. Franco says, hello, Bill. I just find it weird that they did not mention anything related until now. I was involved with the other process and I've always been asked this way. Yeah, because they like to play games, right? They don't ask the tough question up front. They wait till you've committed, you've done all this work, you've prepared for interviews, you got all dressed up, right? That's the worst part. You got all dressed up. You might have even combed your hair. It's like, it's this kind of level of commitment that you've done. And you go down there and you talk to these jackasses. And then after all of this, then they finally ask you the big awkward question, right? And the idea is that, you've done all this commitment. Now you're going to blow the whole thing by answering this. It can be part of like a pressure to bargain you down, right? To get you to lower your price. You know how you go to the store and you buy baked beans, right? Which I know is everyone's favorite food, right? I know they're my favorite food. A good can of baked beans, good for camping, right? Good for, when you are on the couch, right? You've been banished to the couch, or, you have to get drunk in your garage or something, whatever. Baked beans. You want to buy a can of baked beans from the store. Now, what's your behavior, right? Your behavior is, if I can buy the same can of baked beans from two different stores, I'm going to go with the store that's cheaper, right? Okay, this is basic economics, right? Employers follow this also, right? If they can get an employee, if they can fill it with this candidate or this candidate, but this candidate is cheaper, that's what they're going to push for, right? This idea that, they're this big rich company and money is nothing to them, and they just throw it around and they pay people way more money than they need to because they're nice. It's like, that's not a thing, that may sort of exist kind of in charities, but nowhere else that's sane anyway, that we see anywhere. That's not a thing. They're trying to get you, and they'd rather get you for cheap. And if all they have to do is ask you a question twice in a job interview, and that gets you to lower your salary requirement by $10,000 or something, they'll do it. And they do it every day. And it works. You know what I mean? Because people don't like awkwardness, especially people that, have, how can I put this? Less developed communication skills, negotiation skills, right? You don't do that for your living. Like if you're a salesperson or a negotiator or a lawyer or something, like, yeah, you're going to be the heavyweight champion of this kind of stuff. You're actually going to enjoy this process, right? Let's get down to this, right? Let's play some hardball. Let's see what you got, right? It gets them excited, right? But for normal people who aren't insane, this is awkward and they shy away from it and they don't want awkwardness. So when an interviewer puts pressure on them with one question, they kind of back down. And next thing you know, they're working for less money. They've started for $10,000 less, right? When you consider they're going to be there for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years, like the first year you gave up $10,000. The second year you gave up $10,000. You're working for $10,000 under what you would have been making, right? The third year, same thing. Fourth year, same thing. $50,000 if you're there for 5 years. That question cost you because you didn't want any awkwardness, right? This stuff works. That's why they do it, right? The other thing that they do is they convince you that, it's a reasonable amount of money and that you should be happy to work here. You can get people working there believing that they're just lucky to be here and it's a lot of money. It's really fair compensation. you could get the same bunch of people working there, working just as hard, or not as hard, believing that this is ridiculous. You should be paid nearly double this for what you're worth. It's all in the mind, right? So if they can convince you that you're not worth as much and you should be happy with this low number, they will, That's how this stuff works. So, that's why they do this stuff. They're going to try and get you for as low as they possibly can. It's good for the organization. It's also good for the recruiter or the hiring manager. If it's a recruiter, they actually look like a hero to their bosses. They got the talented candidate for $10,000 less money than they were predicting. And that candidate is motivated, and they're going to take the job, and they're going to be happy with the pay. Company thinks that's a good recruiter, right? They're producing results. Okay, where are we here? Tong is here. Tong's in the house. Hey, Bill, says, hope you're having a great day and a healthy week. I always have a healthy week, Why would anyone suspect otherwise? How do you deal with burnout? This week, a company invited me to interview after they sent me an assessment, which I did and passed. Okay, it goes on. After scheduling the interview, they emailed me to say they noticed I applied for a similar role, and they have a policy that I need to wait 12 months and not 6, which they previously said. Okay, let me just run that by me again. After scheduling, they emailed me to say they noticed I applied for a similar role, and they have a policy. And okay, I think you lost me already. You're talking about how do you deal with burnout? They sent you an assessment. They scheduled the interview. You had applied for a similar role, but then they need you to wait 12 months. It's a company I wanted to work with, but feel so disheartened and annoyed. What should I do? Reply to their email on how to stay motivated in the face of. I don't fully understand the situation you're describing, Tong. It seems like these things are unrelated. I don't understand the whole, you have to wait 12 months. That's when you've started in a role in the company. You've started in a role with the company, and you want to apply for another role within the company. You want to move up or sideways. And they're saying, now you got to be in this first role for at least 12 months, right? Is that correct? Is that how I'm reading this? Let me know if that's correct, and I will proceed. Soumarin says, hi, Bill. Hey there. It's good to see you again. I have an interview on Friday. Any tips on managing stress before the interview? Could you also sum up shortly what's the most important thing in interviews? I guess looking agreeable. Thank you. I'm not well prepared. Okay. Obviously, you want to do some preparation. Okay, so this is on Friday. So you got what, 2 days? You can do a lot in 2 days, right? Learn the answers to standard questions, practice one-on-one, in a mirror, by yourself, remembering the answers, saying the answers, right? Then I'd highly recommend you do the thing where you grab somebody else and do a mock interview. Get them to do a pretend job interview. That serves two purposes. Number one, it improves your skills. So you will do a better interview having rehearsed for it, right? With someone else and simulated what you're going to be doing. Okay, so number one, it has intrinsic value. The other reason why you want to do this is because you're going to just feel better about the whole thing. You're going to feel more confident, right? You have more self-confidence. You're going to feel I'm doing pretty good. Whereas if you didn't do that, you might feel oh, I'm kind of nervous, right? So, you know what I mean? That's what I recommend. Really try and do that. Okay, you got 2 days, so you certainly can. Just grab somebody, grab some jackass you got, hanging around, and say look, I don't give a crap what you're doing. Just you're doing this with me now, and you're gonna like it, right? And I don't want to hear any complaints. And they don't really have to do much. They just got to ask you a bunch of questions, put you on the spot, and look at you like this, because you're going to have people looking at you like that. And you've got to be able to remember what you're saying under those conditions, right? Okay, the most important thing in the interview is that you're likable. That's just hands down the number one thing. What does that actually mean? It means It's a collection of things. Like if you want to try and break it down to like a technical manual, what that is, it's things like, first of all, smile. I know that sounds self-evident, but if you go to an interview and you're like, you're looking like this, you're kind of, hi, or you get offended at something, right? That doesn't make you likable. If you go to the interview and you're kind of like, hey, how's it go? Hey, buddy, if you've got a little bit of a smiley face, like I'm trying to do right now, you're looking pleasant, you're looking agreeable, you're looking approachable, right? That really helps. You're the person they would want around them in the workplace. If you're doing the interview with the hiring manager and the hiring manager is there, the hiring manager is going to be your boss if you get the job, right? So they have to like you for them to pick you. They say, I want to work with this person. I want to work with Sous-Marin Nucléaire Jones. That's their whole name. That's their full name, right? And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's because they're likable, because you guys click, right? So looking agreeable, and then doing things like not taking offense. If they ask you a tough question, you kind of try, and like, what I'm doing now, it's like, that's you break the tension with a bit of levity. It's like, you're asking the tough questions here. So at least, it's kind of jovial. You're not creating tension, you're diffusing tension, right? Then you do more mechanical things, okay? If they've done something for you that you appreciate, like for example, you arrived, if it's a physical interview, you arrived there and they said, hi, come on in, have a seat. You can have a seat here, while you wait. Would you like me to get you a drink, like a water or something? Like anything they might have done for you. They might have explained, okay, here's the process. We're going to start in about 15 minutes and you're going to go and you're going to interview with this person in that room, okay? When we call you, so they've told you something. So you say, oh, well, thank you very much for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that. You say thank you when they've done something for you, okay? And they'll have done little things for you. They might have explained what to do. They might have tried to make you comfortable, tried to put you at ease, whatever. You notice that and you thank them. They say, listen, like, I really appreciate you doing that for me. That's very civil of you, right? Like, just thank you very much, that kind of thing. Like, people appreciate that. They go, oh, well, you're welcome, you could, if you wanted to, you could take that to another level. You could say, like, listen, I noticed how, when I first arrived, you came and you took the trouble to explain the process to me. I just want you to know that's really cool, because a lot of people don't do that. And the fact that you do that, I think says something about you guys. Like, I really appreciate it. Keep that up. Something like that, right? Like people hear that kind of thing and they go, oh, well, thank you very much, and then they love you, right? That's the idea. And you're not like doing this in a slimy way. You're not being ingratiating. You're not making something up and just saying nice things. You're honestly thanking them for something they did. That's not slimy in any way. That's legitimate. You're the type of person that makes them feel good about themselves. Who wouldn't want that person around? Right? So being likable is like a collection of all these different things, not creating awkwardness, not like, creating a tense situation or anything. Being friendly, like just acting like, you're among friends. Still means you got to be professional, but you can smile and you can say thank you and this kind of thing, right? So that's kind of the stuff that you can rehearse when you do mock interviews, right? So hopefully that answers your question, Sous-Marin. That's kind of like, if you do that stuff, you're good, like you're well on your way, right? Tong says, sorry it wasn't clear. They revoked the interview because they said I failed an application before with them, and even though I did their assessment, they wanted to schedule an interview. Yeah, this is like a very bureaucratic company. This sounds like a large organization filled with peons that all don't talk to each other. Then they noticed I was a previous applicant and they canceled the interview and rejected my application. Now they said I need to wait another 12 months to apply. Listen. Okay, Tong. Okay, how can I say this? People can do what they want, right? This employer can create all kinds of retarded, idiotic rules for themselves and follow them. You know what I mean? If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do, right? If you ever are in a position in the future to interview someone for a job, you know, you're a successful person that has gone freelance and you've made a lot of money and now you're wanting to build a company around you. You know, you need to hire an assistant, something like that. And you're interviewing people, right? You can make up all kinds of retarded things. You could say like, well, you applied for a job before, so I'm not going to entertain your application for another 3.5 years. Those are the rules, It's like you can do that, right? It's stupid, but you could do that. And hey, if that's what these people want to do, fine, right? It's kind of signaling that they're idiots, but whatever. Hey, that's how you guys do things here. Great. All the more power to you. Most other people don't do that, right? So if that's how these people behave, they have, they can do that. And there's not much you can do about it. You know what I'm saying? But I got good news for you, and that is the world is wide and big, and there are a lot of other opportunities out there, right? There's a lot of other employers. The jobs you see posted, those are 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. The other 80% are not posted, but they're there and you can get them. Okay. So there's a lot of things going on out there, right? And even among posted jobs, there's a lot of stuff. So, if this is how this particular employer is playing it, great. Now, if you're asking this question because you don't want to give up with these people, you really want to work there, despite this kind of garbage, within an organization, there are many individuals, right? And I mean, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. We're going at a slightly higher level now, okay? But what you're describing here is their official hiring policy that's done through the HR department, okay? It's called the recruitment and selection process. And, they have all kinds of rules and policies and procedures and processes, right? They can make whatever crazy rules they want. They can evaluate people in all kinds of crazy ways, whatever. We see that, right? But there's other people in the organization, and most hiring, you may already know this, but if you don't, most hiring doesn't occur through this type of system, right? That's why I said 20% of jobs are posted. The other 80, they don't go through this process, right? Because this process is with a recruiter conforming to official hiring policies, right? Most hiring is not done through recruiters. It is not done in response to an official posted position. It's done by a hiring manager deciding to hire someone, right? In an organization, the hiring manager is the one that originates the job. They say like, okay, listen, I'm the chief accountant. I'm in charge of the accounting department, and I have made a decision that I need to hire another full-time accountant because based on the workload that is coming through my department, what are the demands on my resources, my people? Okay, we need another full-time position. I have tried to run this department with overtime to make up the volume of work, but it's unsustainable. We can't do it. We need to hire another full-time position, and I know that I've decided to allocate some of my budget to that. Okay, so they originate the job. The job exists in their head. They're now looking for, another accountant to hire, right? Okay, so what they do is they contact in some way, shape, or form. If the company has an HR department that does recruitment and selection, that hiring manager, that the chief accountant, they can contact the HR department and say like, listen, I need you guys to post a job, right? Here's the particulars. Okay, they go out, they post it, they do an initial screening, whatever. They set up the job interviews with the candidates, and they coordinate with the hiring manager, the chief accountant, on, if you want to sit in the interviews, here's where we can do them, and I'll tie it to your schedule so you can make it. And then the final decision on who they pick rests with the hiring manager, the chief accountant, right? They have ultimate say of which accountant gets hired, right? The recruiter can make recommendations. The recruiter does a lot of the grunt work. They're the ones that screen all the candidates and present the hiring manager with, here's your final 3 candidates or something. Here's my recommendation, but it's up to you, right? Because when we hire this person, I deal with all the grunt work. I set up their e-payments and, all that, but you're the one that has to work with them. So you have final say. Okay. Now, let's say, Tong, after all this, you're dealing with the recruiter, and the recruiter is telling you, well, we have policies about, who we hire and, if they've applied in the past 12 months or whatever, some such crap, right? If you really wanted to push it with this company, what you could do is you could contact the hiring manager, the chief accountant. Let's say you're an accountant and you're looking for an accountant role, right? You contact the hiring manager and you say, listen, I'm a fully qualified accountant. Here's the problem I solve. I'm available and I love this company. I know you guys do this kind of work here. You've got a big accounting department, right? You're doing accounting across borders and, all this kind of stuff because it's a big multinational company. I can help you with that. If ever you're looking for an accountant, let me know, right? Because I'd love to work for you. Have a great day, right? Something like that. Now, the chief accountant gets this note from you, which you can send them through things like LinkedIn, right? You can see the individual, you can message them directly, so it lands in their lap, right? And then they can decide, well, hey, I need a person. This person seems qualified. They seem enthusiastic, and they obviously want to work here because they're contacting me. Like, who does that if you don't want to work there? You know what I mean? They obviously are demonstrating their passion to work here. And they're also demonstrating their professionalism and their initiative, right? They've sent me a message. If I want to respond to that message, that says something about how good they are. They're very persuasive. They're very professional, right? So you've already shown things. You're already head and shoulder above like anybody else that might be a resume on a desk, right? So if you really wanted to push it with this company, you could get into that stuff. Okay, that's like the hidden job market. That's networking. In this case, it's networking via social networking. And it's technically the type of networking it is called direct outreach. That's where you don't know the person, but you reach out to them. It's very powerful, right? A lot of people can get a lot of jobs by doing this. I've gotten a lot of jobs and a lot of contract work by doing this in my career. You know what I'm saying? So if you really wanted to push it with this company, you could do things like that. But, I don't know. It seems like that'd be more trouble than it's worth. I would just look elsewhere. You know what I mean? I would apply to other jobs, and not stress over these people's stupid internal policies. You're a talented person. If they're not wanting to even consider you because of some arbitrary rule, that's their loss. That gives you a signal of how they operate. That's not a winning way to operate, but whatever. The winning way to operate, by the way, if anybody cares, that's if there's somebody talented that's enthusiastic that can help your company. You listen to them, you look at them, especially if you're hiring. You know what I mean? You don't just like arbitrarily send them away because of some bureaucratic rule. That's not how you build a good workforce, by setting arbitrary rules and things. So does that make sense? Yeah, anyway, there you go. Sumane says, hey, buddy. Yeah. Yeah, you like that? That's endearing. I mean, you gotta sort of say something memorable, right? And not creepy at all, right? Helicopter says, good afternoon, everyone. I have arrived. I have arrived. Sound the trumpets, fire the cannons. I'm here, right? You need to say something like that when you go to a meeting. You got to make an entrance, right? You know, I've seen people do kind of versions of that actually, and not like in jest, like just ego, you know. Yeah, get in the chat. We've reached the end of the chat. There are 22 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I am here to help with questions, your questions for job search, for careers, that kind of stuff. So how to get an interview, how to pass an interview, how to negotiate an offer, or anything really. Networking, the wide world of networking. You know, there's a lot of problems for people that are going through the posted job market, you know, dealing with recruiters. Somebody brought up one of those earlier in this chat. They were talking about work gaps, right? Saying, I have a work gap. I have a current work gap on my resume. It's been 2 years since I had my last job. You know, in the last 2 years, I have not been working. And I'm finding that people are not wanting to give me an interview because they see that, right? Yeah, exactly. That's a thing. Recruiters are trained not to try and find the best candidate, because that's quite challenging. It's also really an unreasonable expectation for them, right? But they are trained, what their strategy is to find the least risky candidate, right? That they have a higher likelihood of being able to do, right? For example, you know, somebody might be qualified on paper, but when you talk to them, they got like major personal issues. They're like extremely irritable, you know? Or they take offense at like everything. They get like offended over like every little teeny tiny thing you say, you know? It's like, I don't care how qualified you are on paper, that's not going to work, you know? Right? So, you know what I mean? Like, you would not hire that person because there's a higher likelihood they wouldn't work out, right? So that's kind of what recruiters are doing. They're looking for the least risky candidate, the one where you don't have any red flags. So there's a higher likelihood that if you hire them, they will work out. They will stay. They will be happy. They will do the job well, you know? This is why it leads to recruiters caring about things like years of experience disproportionately, right? You know, how can you expect us to believe that you can do a job if you've never actually done that job before? It's like, well, that's what a moron says who doesn't understand the job, right? It's like, if you understood what the job is and what it takes to do that job, and you saw my resume, so you see that I have this and this and this and this, you would rightly conclude that, you know, in all likelihood, I can do that job. It's not going to be an issue, you know? So, you know what I mean? But that's why it might not make sense to people. It's because you assume that recruiters are looking for the best candidate. They're not. They're looking for the least risky candidate. That's why they'll hire the person with 30 years experience over the person with 1 year experience, right? Just as a default, you know? The person with 1 year experience could have way more energy, a lot better attitude, a lot more reasonable expectations, and they're a lot better. They're more well adjusted, you know? Tong says, yeah, it makes sense. Just so much wasted effort, and I feel so burnt out from dealing with these donkeys. Tong, you're awesome, okay? Listen, what you're going through, many other people are going through. That's how job search works. That's how it goes. You know, it sucks. It's like being punched in the gut. You know, it really does. That just happens. You know, but I got good news for you, and the thing is that it's finite. This is temporary. You're gonna get a good job at the end of this, okay? It's just temporary right now. And when you do get a job, you're gonna forget all of this pain, all of this confusion, all of this frustration, you know, this lack of confidence, you know, and this feeling of persecution. You're gonna forget it all, you know? You're not gonna commit it to memory. You don't even remember any of this, you know, because you'll be gainfully employed and everything's working out, you know? You know, The goal, though, is to, you're going to encounter good employers and bad employers, good leads and bad leads. And if a lead goes south, whether you're the type of person that makes decisions based on facts and numbers in a cold, calculated way, or you're the type of person that makes decisions based on emotions and like how it feels to you, okay? Regardless of how you look at things, okay? Leave the bad people behind and move on to finding more good people, right? The reason why people deal with bad options, like maybe this employer, is because you feel that, there aren't any good ones out there. And right now you aren't in contact with any good ones. So just go and look for some good ones. And when you find them, then you realize you don't have to talk to these people ever again. You know what I mean? It sucks. You put in effort and then that lead doesn't work out. And you know what? That is the sales process. Because what you're actually engaged in right now is the sales process. You, think of somebody, just bear with me for a second. Think of somebody knocking on doors, as a extreme example of this. You knock on a door, would you like to? And then they slam the door in your face, right? You know what I mean? Like, if you're the type of person that's doing outside sales, you go door to door. You're putting effort into each of these leads. It takes your time, it takes your effort, and it leads to frustration. Like you're emotionally invested and it causes you to feel bad when the lead doesn't work out. So you're putting in a lot of different things and then the lead doesn't work out. So it's all wasted, right? Okay. But you see, the way the sales process works is it works on ratios. So if you knew, that on average, you had to knock on 50 doors to make one sale, okay? And you get up in the morning and you say, I need to make 5 sales today. Well, there's a certain comfort in predicting the process, and that is that if I need to make 5 sales, I need to knock on 250 doors today. 49 out of 50 will say no. That's fine, because that means that 1 out of 50 will say yes, and all I need is 5 yeses today, right? So it's like a job interview. It's like looking for a job. What's your ratio? You apply to 100 jobs, you get maybe 1 interview, or whatever the ratio is for you, maybe 300 jobs, 1 interview, 50 jobs, 1 interview, whatever the ratio is. And then of the interviews you go to, you maybe do 6 interviews to get 1 offer, something like that. It's going to be a ratio, like a funnel. So to get 1 offer that works out, you've got to have 5 interviews or whatever it is. And then that means you've got to have, X many applications, like 1,000 applications or whatever it is, right? So the idea is that that seems daunting. That's a lot of wasted effort. You're right. But if you know that that's the ratio, it's predictable. If you want 1 offer, you do 1,000 applications of this type. If you want 2 offers, you do 2,000 applications of this type. It's all based on ratios, right? So in one sense, it's wasted effort. In another sense, it's not, because it's part and parcel of the process you have to go through to get that offer, right? Finance works the same way, by the way. It's all based on risk and return. You, instead of applying for jobs, you're making investments. You're putting a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, a little bit of money there. Now, some of these are going to work out. The value is going to go up. Some of these are going to not work out. They're going to go down. There's no way to predict. It's all based on random statistical probability, right? But we know that, this combination of things, right, because they're diversified and whatnot, on average, your value of everything you've invested will go up by, say, 5%, or 10%, whatever it is, right? So some things go up, some things go down, but in the end, at the end of a year or something, your value will have increased by 5 to 10%, whatever it is. That's just how this works. It's a numbers game, okay? So it sucks because that lead didn't work out, but that's the process you go through to get the offer. And I'll say one final thing about this, so I don't beat it to death completely, but that is this, okay? Some leads, you put in the effort, and through random chance, Tong, you get a situation like this where they say there's some stupid rule, and that means that you don't get the job, right? So it just random chance this company had that rule in place, right? Well, you keep doing this, and the next opportunity, it's just going to be random chance that what they happen to be looking for is exactly what you have, okay? So just like one thing doesn't work out from random chance, the next thing does work out through random chance. You just happen to stumble upon the person that is a lot like you, that's the hiring manager. They see you and they go, yes, that's the person I want, right? It's serendipity. It's just like things working out by accident, right? It's based on statistics and probability. And that's the job search process. Okay, and look at it another way. All I know is that in my life, I haven't gotten a few things that in my earlier career that I really wanted. Turns out a lot of those were blessings in disguise, because I saw what happened to that employer or that situation afterwards, and I'm glad I wasn't there for that, and I'm glad that I wasn't part of that. It turns out they were exploiting everybody, or, there was a big scandal, or, like whatever. So, you know what I mean? Sometimes these things can be blessing in disguise. So you put all that together, you're fine. And this goes to everybody who's in this situation. Get back on the horse, keep going. If necessary, take a moment, kind of take care of your mental health, right? Do something fun. Force yourself to do something fun. Pick up your spirits. Recognize the situation for what it is. It's part of a big process that's going to work out. It's just that there's ups and downs along the way. And, you're going to be fine. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense, Tong. That is the situation. Okay? And if you need help along the way, I'm always here doing live streams. Peter says, hi, Bill. If the offer comes in lower than the current salary, what's the best way to counter that? Can I say, sorry, this is below what I'm currently making? I've never mentioned my salary, just gave them a wise range. Okay, here's a couple of tips. This isn't original to me or anything, but don't say no. Say yes, okay? Say, absolutely, that's wonderful. Yes, I'm excited about doing this offer, and I will do this offer if... you can do this. The answer is yes. Here's what I need for it to work for me. Right? Now, that's just semantics. That's just about communication. But basically, obviously, you're not going to take, an offer of anything if it's not to your advantage, right? Okay. So you're going to basically either refuse it outright, say, absolutely not, no deal. Or what's usually better to do is to say, can't do it, but I'm going to need this, right? So the way I would recommend you phrase it is you say, absolutely, that's great. I'm really excited. Thank you for making the offer. I'm really looking forward to doing this. Let's do this, right? Now I've looked at the offer, and this is fine, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. This, I don't know. I mean, I'm used to getting more for that, but you know what? That's fine. This is good, this is good, this is good. Now this, I'm going to need you to scratch out that number and put this number. And as soon as you do that, we can get rolling on this. Right? Now, if they can't do that, then there's no dice. It just doesn't work, right? But that's how that's what I'd recommend doing is you don't say no, you just go back and say, here's what I need. And the way I would articulate it is by doing that. Don't say no, say yes. Let's do this. Now, I've looked at your offer. This is fine. That's fine. I just need you to change that number and we can get rolling on it. When would you like me to start? Right? That's your response. Okay. It makes them want to agree if they possibly can. If they can't, it's moot. Right? Okay. Peter says, thank you for the excellent advice. You're welcome, Peter. Hopefully that works for you. Okay, we've reached the end of the chat. There are 20 people here. I am actually going to be back in like half an hour because I have another live stream scheduled on this channel. Okay, check out my courses. Go and get this course. If you are between jobs, you don't know what to do, it's not going anywhere fast, you're wondering if you're doing something wrong, check out that course. That explains what to do, okay? It also covers how to apply for jobs in the posted job market, right? Which a lot of people probably are attempting. It also explains how to get jobs in the hidden job market, and it's tailored to introverts in the methodology it recommends. Okay, now some people are doing that. A lot of people more advanced in their careers are already doing that. Most young people are not tuned in to really do that, especially if you're just starting out. Okay, that's where you're going after the jobs that aren't posted. And you're hacking the system in a way. I know that sounds dramatic, but you're going around the official hiring processes, which is how most people actually get hired. You know, you go to the hiring managers, not to the recruiters. You're not following their standard process that they have rules for. You're going to the hiring managers, and it's organic. It's based on two people talking, right? If you want to learn how to do that, check out that course. I've got some free stuff on my channel. I've done a little bit of free stuff here and there, some videos. But this is the full shebang. That's where everything is. If you are looking to climb the corporate ladder, if you're looking to get into management instead of maybe being a worker your whole career, you want to be a supervisor, or you are a supervisor, you want to be a manager, you want to climb that ladder, check out this course, Write Like a Professional. It's called Write Like a Professional. It is about writing, but it's really about communication skills. What is the right way to respond in different situations? And what that will do is that will make you a contender. You'll be seen as a contender for higher level positions, okay? Because communication skills is one of the things you have to tack on to be considered for higher level stuff. So I don't care what technical skills you have to have this to be a candidate for things like that. You just have to. So everything I learned from going from a supervisor all the way to a CEO, I put in that course. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, and just a correction, everything I learned going from a supervisor to a CEO in terms of communication skills, I put into that course. Okay. There's other things you have to tack on depending on what position you're going for. If you want to be a general manager, you need also people management skills. You also need financial skills. Things like this, but this is the communication component of it. Okay, so if that's interesting to you, or any of the stuff is interesting, these are all linked in the description box below. Check those out. I don't offer consulting. Other people offer like career coaching and consulting. I don't do that. But I do have courses that, it's like way better bang for the buck. For like $100 or whatever, you can get like 1 hour with a career coach. For me, you get like an entire course, like all this stuff. So that's what I've got. If you want to go deeper with me, check those out. And I will be back in half an hour. Tong says, thanks for great words as always. Honest HR Nitrous is the weekly pick-me-up. Well, good. I'm glad. I have an episode of that starting in half an hour. So I'll be back on this channel and we can do this some more. You guys are awesome. I wish you the very best of luck. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.